All right, everyone. Welcome to Soapbox Masons. This is a broadcast where we talk about things that push our buttons or hot button issues within Masonry. Our opinions, the opinions of the guest and the host, do not represent any lodge or Grand Lodge or appendant body. The opinions are our own. So with that disclaimer out of the way, I will introduce today's guests. We have, in no particular order, Brother Joe Martinez from Virginia. We have Brother Kevin Homan from Virginia.
You got it.
And we have Brother Brad Drew from the great state of Kentucky. And we have been talking, and what we want to discuss today is initiation, the initiatic experience. And are there Masons who are dues card carriers, but really may have never truly been initiated? So who wants to fire off first?
Joe.
Joe.
Clearly the right answer for this.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. So happy for you to kick this off. And I know it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And it's definitely going to be added to the arsenal of awesome Masonic things on the interweb. So kudos, man. Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question. So let me answer the second question first and then the first question second. So yes, there are absolutely people who are members and people who are Masons is the easiest way I can describe it. So you have people that pay their dues and, you know, they get a card and it goes in their wallet and once a year they show up for things or, you know, they come for a crappy meal. And then there are actual Masons. Don't mind my dog. She's a girl, but she's not clandy or anything. So, I know girl Masons. Ooh. So, your point. Yeah, there are many of those that are, I'd say the majority of them are just members. You know, they just, they don't understand, or maybe they were never privy to the initiatic process. And maybe that's all our faults, but, I'd say it's really a small minority of people who are actually quote unquote initiated or fit the categories of initiation.
I would agree with that. I think, you said it may be our fault. Are we opening that west gate a little too wide? Are we not taking caution in who we're letting into our fold?
Yeah, I'll take that. And Matt, thanks for having me tonight. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, to kind of ride off of Joe's, it is our fault, you know, from the individual Masons to the Blue Lodges on up to the Grand Lodges. You know, and I think, you know, part of the problem is this goal to get membership, right? We talk about the golden days after World War I and World War II, when then we're flocking into the fraternity and, you know, record numbers of members. You know, we built great buildings and then we went stagnant. And, you know, now we have these, you know, in many cases, buildings that are, you know, approaching or pushing 100 years old. They need a lot of maintenance and the dues are at a point where they can't support it. And yeah, you know, we keep pushing for members. So we're having one-day conferrals. And, you know, that's not to knock the idea of a one-day conferral. I know Masons, good Masons that have gone through the process, but, you know, we rush them through and then nothing after that. We have business meetings at our lodges. As Joe said, we serve meals and, you know, the only thing in many cases on the agenda at a stated meeting is business. And then we go about and then we go home. So yeah, you know, like I said, it's on us as the individual Masons to improve the process. It's on the individual Blue Lodges and on the Grand Lodges to do something about it. And, you know, whether nobody has the right answer or hasn't figured it out, I don't know what it is. But yeah, there's plenty of blame to go around.
There is, and you hit on something, I think, key there, the revenue, trying to get money into the lodges to keep the doors open. Brad, what do you think?
Yeah. First, thank you for having me, and you're welcome. But I think, I think about this idea of, Masons versus members, and I agree with Joe. The thought that comes to my mind, and I've had this conversation because we have a game to get to, or we haven't, it's an event to do. Or we prolong it, and then when we focus on thinking about proficiency, it's really not proficient. It's just a regurgitation of a catechism, and how good is your memory work. And then here in Kentucky, it's 28 days, 1 lunar month before you can get your next degree and become proficient. So it's how fast can we get you through, which I think goes to Kevin's point a little bit, is how fast can we collect your dues, and how fast can we put you into a chair, and how fast can we get you into our lodge so that we have another beating part of our heart. But this idea, the initiation, I just think of shortchanging. I mean, we're shortchanging guys. When I look at, why are we losing guys within 18 months or 20 months or 3 years is, I think the average. What are we offering them? We're not offering them. And I think a lot of those guys are probably not Masons that we wanted anyway. But I think that there's probably 5-10% of the guys in that group that we are losing, that like, man, I wish we would have spent a little bit more time and a little bit more energy, because the initiation is so important, but the follow through and that post initiation with especially the mentorship and the proficiency and actually understanding what the heck you just went through is so important, other than just memorizing something on a piece of paper from mouth to ear, because that is what we get so caught up in, is how fast can you memorize something so that you can become a master mason. That way you can sit in an officer's chair, or you can do something. And, so for me, I'm like, we're shortchanging guys so often by not doing all of these other things, because we're so worried about speed and getting them to this next destination, which really doesn't matter for them because they're going to be gone in 6 months anyway.
Yeah, we've really created a vicious cycle where we're rushing them in. They're not getting anything out of it. They show up to a lodge meeting and they realize this is not what they signed up for, and then we never see them again. And so then we're desperate to grab the next guy to come in, and so it becomes this cycle of just pushing guys through. And the irony here is that we've all taken obligations not to disclose the secrets of Masonry. We consider our rituals, our degrees, to be almost sacred in a way. We try to keep those close to our hearts, so we try to ingrain in that candidate that you are not to discuss or disclose the secrets of Masonry to anyone, and yet we're letting just anybody through the door and handing it all to them. Mm-hmm. Joe?
For probably the first time in my life, I'm actually going to disagree with you there. Okay. And it was the way you framed it, and it kind of goes back to the question you asked Kevin about guarding the West Gate. Is it the fault of the West Gate that we're letting in these quote unquote substandard folks, or people that would not have gone through if it had been more rigorous, or is it a top-down problem that we've basically just watered this down into a social club, right? So is it these guys' fault who come and knock at the door, and they see this mediocre experience, and because of the mediocrity, they have no vested interest in it and depart soon? I think it's more that being the fault than the fault of us letting every Tom, Dick, and Harry in, because I don't know about you guys, I'm a member of many lodges in many jurisdictions, more so than I tell my wife, because I have an absurd amount of commitments. But you don't see 50 people knocking on a door on a Saturday every time. It's not, you're not getting droves and droves of people. You're getting drips and drabs of people that are interested. To your point, are there probably people that have become members? I won't call them the other thing, that have just gotten their degrees and moved on because there's been nothing to offer and they have nothing to offer us. Sure. But again, we start with a watered down, soggy experience. And that's all that 95% of the places out there offer.
Well, you're right. I mean, we have a term for that, green bean masonry, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Where, it's a supper club. It's fraternalization, but there's little more to it than that. listening to the secretary read the minutes, pay some bills, and try to rush out on time to catch whatever game is on television or whatever the case may be. And so I think it's, Joe, I think it's a little bit of column A and column B, and I think we might be getting off into a whole other topic when we talk about, how lodges are failing men, because I think there are a high number of men who join the lodge looking for one thing. They're looking for the esoteric experience or looking for the initiatic experience. And, they a lot of times they really get something out of the degrees. But then the lodge fails them because the lodge does not continue that.
I would say, yeah. And to bring it back to the point of this episode of, it being initiation, I'd say that's the problem right there. We are not initiating people. We are putting them through a very watered down, sometimes pretty, but oftentimes watered down degree system. And to your point, you said something really eloquent where you said that, we take this ritual and it's secret and it's sacred to us and we impress it upon our heart. No, we don't. I mean, these guys at most hear it twice, right? Once when they go through the degrees and once when they go through their catechism, and then they never hear it again. Why? Because they don't show up. So nothing's been imprinted on their heart that is so deep and lasting and significant that, it becomes a part of their life and their daily activity. So, we fail them in that regard too.
Oh, and I think to your point, Joe, and maybe to your point too, Matt, thinking about the West Gate as it applies to initiation, is so many of these guys are coming in, whether they have connections to family or friends, or they've heard it through the community or whatever it may be. And they're coming in, and I'm sure, and I know, brothers that I've chatted with, they are being told about all these wonderful things that happen after you're a master mason, the things that you can get into. So, I mean, from the beginning, we're diminishing that whole initiatic experience for whatever it may take, 3 months to 3 years. We're just talking about, you can, once, you can travel and you can visit and you can join other lodges and you can get involved in this and do that. I think we're just completely wiping over that whole process to get to something that's really most of the time not even worth it.
Well, I kind of have two points. One on, what Brad was just saying, my joke there about you can join the shrine, right? Like, what was it back in the day? To join the shrine back in the day, you had to be a Knight Templar and a 32nd degree Mason, right? And then they didn't eliminate it, but then the next step was, well, you just had to be one. And now you just need to be a Master Mason, right? So yeah, that push to membership, and we water this stuff down and we make it less special. But, Joe kind of sparked the thought that, thinking back to when I was initiated, I remember, when I parked in the parking lot for my entered apprentice degree, I sat in my car for a second and the thought in my head was, I need to remember every single thing that happens. Like, cause I was like, oh, this is special. Like, this is a big deal. Went through my degree, walked out to my car. I was like, oh shit. What happened? Which, to be fair, is natural, right? Because a lot happens. You're not seeing everything for reasons. And so, yeah, and I think from there, as you work through the catechisms, I really think having the right catechism coach and mentor is a big deal, because you can learn the catechism, you can memorize the catechism, but if you don't have somebody that understands it, that's researched the meaning and read up on that stuff, like, yeah, as Joe said, you're just learning it and regurgitating it to go on to the next degree. And that's, I think, something we don't do a good job at anymore. Maybe we never did. I don't know. But, very few people are able to teach the catechism and stop in place and be like, here's what this means. Here's what that means. Like, you just don't get that. It's learn the catechism, whether your lodge does like Saturdays where you get together and do catechism practice and you shoot the shit during part of it. Yeah, it's Joe's dead on with it. It's watered down because nobody really takes the time to kind of dive into it anymore. If you want to, you have to go off on your own and read find the books and read up on it. and I'll stop and joke because I see you want to talk. Sorry.
No, I mean you literally hit the nail on the head. And what I find super interesting is, at least in one of my lodges, I'm a catechism instructor, and it's been about me. I'll tell you right now, it takes people who have me as their catechism instructor twice as long to go through the process and everybody else. And I've gotten about a 50% satisfaction rate. You know, some people are like, wow, Joe stops and talks about too much crap all the time. And that's why it takes me twice as long. Or I'll get the other 50% that are like, holy crap, I never knew this meant all that stuff until we sat down and broke it down. And, you know, and then when I memorized it, it actually meant something and I understand the meaning behind it.
What are you getting out of it if you don't have those conversations? What are you getting out of it?
I mean, it's exactly, I mean, going back to keeping it in the concept of initiation, when I went through the degrees in Maryland, you know, way back when, early 2000s, that's literally what I got. I showed up twice a week, and I was in the Army at the time, so I didn't have a lot of free time. I showed up at the lodge twice a week. I memorized a couple of sentences. We went over those sentences for about 45 minutes, and then that was it. I left. And that's literally all we did, was just memorize the catechism.
That was mine.
Yep.
To a T.
Mine too. Yeah.
Yep.
I think all of us have that. And, you know, Kevin, to your point, you said maybe it's always been that way. And we can go back and look at Dr. Albert Mackey. He wrote about this. He called these men who memorized ritual, memorized the catechisms and degrees, but they didn't understand the words that were coming out of their mouth. He called them parrot masons. And so it's nothing new that we're dealing with. But I'm wondering if the problem has not gotten worse instead of better over that century or so.
COVID's not helping, certainly.
No, it's not. It's not.
Or maybe it is.
Well, yeah, from a certain perspective, yeah, you're right. Maybe.
Yeah. Not the topic of tonight's show.
No, that's true.
No, that could be another one. Yeah.
We've already talked about like 6 more episodes, but anyway, yeah.
I know I should have been taking notes this whole time. But yeah, I mean, you know, going back to Mackey, calling them parrot masons, the problem seems to maybe have gotten worse over a century and a half that it has gotten better. And I think we do need to take a look at the Grand Lodge level and at the lodge level, not necessarily blame the initiates, but are the Grand Lodges taking it seriously? And I'll start at the Grand Lodge because it's a top-down systemic problem. If the Grand Lodges are not supporting this type of discussion, if they're just more interested in the revenue and running men through the degrees, then lodges are not going to take it as seriously either. Should there be a system in, I know some Grand Lodge jurisdictions have something similar to this, but should there be a system where the mentors or coaches, whoever's teaching the catechism, have to be certified in some way to make sure they actually understand what they're talking about?
Oh, absolutely. I think at a minimum that needs to be handled at the lodge level. I mean, if you have men that are, you know, delivering catechism training, or like, you know, at my lodge, we call it a mentor. I mean, truly, it's a mentorship guidebook program. You know, those men are handpicked, and they have to have, you know, not so many years of service to the lodge necessarily, or, you know, they don't have to be a past master, but they need to be men that, you know, understand and can regurgitate it, can start at the beginning, end in the middle, and go back to the second, you know, line of the first part. I mean, they can explain the program and exactly what's happening. But absolutely, I mean, your lodge needs to identify those individuals and have backups if need be, and be mentoring new individuals for those roles. And certainly, you know, that is a concept that can be looked at the Grand Lodge level as well. You know, at a not just having a committee on work that just knows ritual, or a committee on this or that just can go out and say, oh, you're proficient or you're not proficient. Men that are capable and fully able to, you know, teach and be able to explain what the heck they're talking about.
So let's take a step back, because we were talking about men who are dues carriers, but maybe not really Masons. They miss the initiatic experience. So let's take the scenario where you have a lodge whose trying to do all the right things. The mentor is trying to impress upon the candidate the importance of the words that he's saying, trying to point out the symbolism. But that initiate or candidate is just not digging it, just not picking up on it, could care less about it. Not that they don't understand it, they just don't care. What do we need to do to better vet men who are petitioning to join our lodges? What do we need to do to say, yes, he's a good fit for Masonry? And I'll throw this out there, and I know it'll be controversial, but we have a number of Masons who are Masons because their fathers or grandfathers or uncles, or there's some kind of family tie in there, Lewis Masons, that are coming through. And is that sufficient reason to allow them into our lodges just because they're related to another Mason? Is that sufficient?
Well, I mean, I think you're going to get the initial answer that no, it's not sufficient, and I don't think somebody's going to tell you otherwise. If that was the only thing that was on an application, then I would say that's a problem there. But we do across all of our different jurisdictions, we do have some qualifications that fit quote unquote regular Masonry. That being a belief in a supreme being. That you were a man and that you have not committed a felony, things like, your generic stuff that most jurisdictions agree to. But there really isn't anything on anybody's applications that I've ever seen that says, why do you want to be a Mason? What brought you to Masonry? Usually that comes out in coffee talk after a meeting, or if someone knocks on the door of your lodge and you get these half-baked answers. And then, sometimes you have an investigation committee after someone's put in a petition, or you should. But again, nobody ever gets to the heart of the matter of what brought you to the door of Masonry. Why didn't you join the Rotary Club, or why didn't you join the Kiwanis or the Moose Lodge, or what's different about Masonry? Nobody ever asks that,
That's a good point.
Well, I'd ask the question, do we do a good job selling what we do to our candidates? And I agree with you, Joe. We don't,
we don't know what we are, Kevin.
Yeah.
And that's going all the way back to Matt's initial question. Sure, we can start at the Grand Lodge level, but most Grand Lodges could not define for us what we are, right? Because we're so many different things to so many different people. Yeah. We have no mission statement. We have none. I don't care what jurisdiction you live in. You don't have a mission statement that you can drive behind. And as a result, it gets all watered down. And you brought up Mackey, which I love. And you're absolutely right. He does bitch about the same things 100 plus years ago. But the problem is that Mackey didn't have the exacerbated issues that we have now. Mackey was around before we built all these ginormous buildings that cost a lot of money. Mackey was around before the time of the golden age of fraternalism, where everybody and their mother joined something. So all those problems came after Mackey, and now we're dealing with them, plus the same issue of parrot Masons that you were talking about. So I think it's 10 times worse.
At least 10 times worse, if not more.
Yeah. We dug ourselves into a deep hole, plain and simple,
We have. So then now between the four of us, how do we fix that hole?
That's probably a whole nother episode itself, Matt.
Probably a series of episodes there.
No, I mean, I love what Brad said about, a way to qualify men to be mentors in the catechism and our ritual. The problem is I find myself, how do we do that? You try and push something like that on, committees on work and committees on education, and then it's going to fall on, it's unfortunately going to fall on deaf ears. They're worried about picture perfect ritual every time, and just making sure that they learn the ritual, and that's it. Getting their gold cards, getting their silver cards. I wish I had the answer. I don't, but it's brilliant.
It is, but going back to our original premise, let's say hypothetically that lodges were doing everything just right. Grand lodges were doing everything just right. Hypothetically, we all know that's not the case, but just for imagination land. the men who are approaching our doors, who are more curious because they saw National Treasure or they read a Dan Brown book or something like that. Are we able to vet them? Are we even able to? Sometimes they come to the door with all the right answers, and maybe, are we missing something? Joe, there are some lodges that here in North Carolina, when a man gives his petition, we read his petition in the lodge. The petition lays over for at least 28 days. Then we vote on his petition. And rarely do we ever wait months to read his petition or vote on it. But there are lodges where they require that candidate or that petitioner to spend some time with the lodges, engage in activities with the lodges, dinners, and really feel him out before they even read his petition. Is there some merit to doing that?
There absolutely is, and I've actually lived it. So I have seen both. And my mother lodge right now is pretty much that former example that you gave, where we get a petition and we, during that lunar month, we do the investigative committee, we go meet his family, this, that, and the other thing. We make sure they're not a crazy person. That's pretty much it. Now, I'll say the lodge that I joined in the District of Columbia, and this throws people for a loop. I was already a Mason when I went to join that lodge, and it was at the end of 2017, and I had been visiting this lodge for a couple of months, and I walked in, and they're very, very heavy on observant practices, and that was my first experience with it, and I absolutely gobbled it up, and I loved it, and it was about a couple of months after I started going to that lodge with a friend who introduced it to me. I went over to the master and I said, "Hey, I'm really interested in affiliating. What can I do to become a member of the lodge?" And he looked at me, and I'm not going to name names or locations or anything, but he looked at me and said, "That's not what we do here." I was like, "Oh, do tell." And he explained to me that you need to come here and you need to make sure that this is a right fit for you, this lodge, and that you are a right fit for us. So keep coming to lodge, keep coming to dinners, keep meeting all the brothers. We're going to make sure that you meet every single member of this lodge at some point or another. And then we'll let you know when we'd like you to have a petition. And I walked out of the lodge that night and I was like, well, this is bullshit, right? I'm like, I'm already Mason. This is not cool, blah, blah, blah. And that was my initial reaction. But the more I thought about it and the more I actually kept attending and going and meeting people, the more I thought that, wow, they have something really special here and they work really, really hard to keep it. And it took me 8 months from the time I asked till 8 months later when they actually handed me a petition to join, which was super exciting. And I had already been a Mason for, 12 plus years. So it was super exciting to get that. And my whole time there, I had met guys who were prospects, not even, people who had not had a petition in hand, that had been going there for a year. Just keep coming back, going to all the open events, talking to all the brothers, having a meal with all of us and soaking up what that lodge was and what that lodge represented, because that lodge had a vision, and they had an identity and they worked really hard to keep it. So if you ask me now, I would say the latter is probably the more successful option for Masonry, probably not for membership. So that's probably the nicest way I can answer that.
Yeah, but is membership the ultimate goal? I think, in my opinion, Masonry has just gotten way too big, and it was never meant to be a massive global organization. I think it was meant to be smaller and more intimate without so many lodges everywhere.
Taboo, Matt. Mm-hmm. Can't say that.
I know. But that's the reason why we call it Soapbox Masons, right? It's I know there are a lot of lodges and grand lodges that are going to cringe at this idea, but it's not about the bottom line. It's not about having ornate buildings. It's not about having these magnificent annual communications with banquets and black tie affairs and all this other stuff. It's cool. I enjoy that stuff, but it has to be feasible. That shouldn't be a goal of Masonry. I'd be happy with us just paring it down to probably about a third of the lodges, if not less, that we have in the country right now. I'd be okay with that. I'd be okay with us dealing with about a third of the membership we have, because it is membership. We have these members, not Masons, and yeah, they keep their dues help keep the lights on, and
That's
so there
right.
is some kind of credit there if you're trying to save your building or patch the hole in the roof. You need those dues paying members, but I think we need Masons more than we do members.
Yeah.
I think, to piggyback a little bit off of what Joe was explaining, and I love that story because I think we probably all have, I know I at least have a similar story, but, I think for the lodges that want to focus on bringing the right people in at the right time, you need to have the right people in place as well. And I can say that just from personal experience. At my lodge, I chair what we call our Prospects and Visitors Committee. So it is my responsibility with two other brothers that every single email communication, social media, interest, website, click, to contact us, to find out more, everything comes to me and then it's filtered down. And, I am the very first person they talk to in that very first phone call or email. We don't talk about how to join. We don't talk about the timeline to join. If they ask about it, I might give them a quick, we'll talk about that later on down the road. This is generally what it takes kind of thing. But, I'm talking about our culture. I'm talking about what we value in our lodge. And I'm talking about what we don't offer and what we're not looking for. And every week, I talk to 4 to 6 guys a week just because we get a lot of interest from all over. And probably one maybe a week or somebody that I might invite to an event or a dinner or a lodge meeting now that we're not having dinner. But 3 to 4 guys a week, I tell them, this seems like maybe what you're looking for is not what we have to offer. And that's not a bad thing. There are, and unfortunately at the point that, I'm in with my Grand Lodge, my immediate go-to is there's some other lodges in the area that might be a better fit for what you're looking for, which shouldn't be the case. I shouldn't have to say that, but sometimes I do tell guys as well, you're really looking for is what this organization has, or really what you can find at this, group down the road that's not not Masonic. And, for me, when I first took over that role and I, came into the lodge and I received this committee, it was really nerve wracking. Like, oh my gosh, how am I going to have to tell people? Because I was mentored into this role. Like, here's what we expect of you and that's why we picked you for this role. And oh my gosh, how am I going to have these conversations? But if you are confident in your abilities to convey what the value, and for us, again, we really focus on culture of our lodge. I have never had any pushback. I've never had anybody ticked off. I had some people I could tell were kind of let down, but, I give them options. I can't just say I'm not, I think if you have the right people that are giving options too. And part of my kind of spiel is here's 2 other lodges that might be available for you. They have different cultures and this one may be what you're looking for. And I have also referred them to other organizations. It's great that you want to just donate time and money to community stuff. That's awesome. Here's 3 local Kentucky organizations that you would get so much more out of. Now, am I able to deny anybody? No. When we bring people in, and it's kind of to Joe's story a little bit, we don't talk about petitioning really for 4 to 6 months. If it comes up in conversation, we, again, quickly answer. We talk about that's something we'll look at later on. But, one of the, like my second or third phone call to a person, and we call them prospects, typically that third phone call is when I'm inviting them to a meeting or a dinner, or we have a lot of Zoom prospect calls right now. Usually that third call is when I'm talking about like our expectation for you is 3 to 6 months before we ever talk about actually joining. And I've had some guys say, oh, it's going to take that long. My uncle told me it was going to be shorter than that. Again, I just kind of go back and here's what our culture is. Here's what we're looking for. And I've never had any pushback, but you have to, at the lodge level and thinking Grand Lodge as well, you have to have people in play that are confident in expressing that. I don't think we have that.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, Drew, Brad, that was very much my situation as well. I was initiated into the lodge, rushed through the degrees, thrown into an officer chair. And at the time, I honestly thought that's what I wanted, just because that's what I was told I wanted, right? And, having the wisdom to look back, I realized, oh, I wish it had taken me longer. If it had taken me years to get through the degrees, I think I would have appreciated it so much more. I would have gotten so much more out of it. I had been a Master Mason probably I don't know, 6 or 7 years before I really even started to realize there was more to Masonry than green bean dinners and charity fundraisers and paying the bills and reading the minutes. And it shouldn't have been that way, because when I joined, just like you gentlemen, you joined looking for one thing and may have found something else in your mother lodge that was not really up to your expectations or what you were looking for. But for whatever reason, we stuck around anyway. But a lot of men don't. They don't stick around because they're not getting that. But those, I think, are men who join for the right reasons, and the lodge fails them. That's a lodge problem. That's a Grand Lodge problem. But then we also have the other problem of the men who are just curious about Masonry, who just show up and they've got enough money for the dues and the initiation fee, and the lodge says, "Hey, I see money coming this way. Let's get this guy in here." Those are the guys that can damage an organization, because they go through the degrees. You put them in officer chairs, and they don't get it, and they can actually do a lot more harm to a lodge and even a Grand Lodge just for having them in.
My lodge had a case like that. Three of our officers, and this was when I was still pretty young a Mason, right? We had 3 guys who joined the lodge within a relatively short time frame of each other. And, as you pointed out, where we are as an organization, we're quite often rushing guys into our chairs to be officers, right? Because there's a shortage. Essentially same thing happened to these guys. They became officers, and outside the lodge, they started their own business, and that business got toxic, and it spilled into the lodge. And none of them ever finished the chairs. I think that was the fault of that. No, I don't think. I know it was the fault of the lodge for not doing a good enough job investigating them. And they, I think in some of the cases, the guys, told a good story, getting in. But yeah, Matt, you're dead right. The wrong guys can do seriously lasting damage on a lodge if you're not careful, as a lodge or as a brother. Absolutely.
That's an interesting story. And I was actually going to ask a question while you were telling it. Is it the fault of the lodge, or the fact that they did not go through that initiatic journey, which all of us started off with talking about not having, right? So, whose fault?
I think in this case it was a bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah. We tell ourselves that, the ritual, what do we tell men who are petitioning our lodge, candidates, prospects? We make good men and we make them better. Well, how do we do that? And too often guys are like, well, the ritual, the ritual does that. Well, how does the ritual do that? I mean, it can, if you study it hard enough and take it to heart, but I mean, that's a cop-out answer to me, right? Like, I can live by the ritual. I can still make mistakes. Come on. Like, that's silly. But yeah, I do think there are lessons to be learned in our ritual, Joe, that if they had gotten the proper experience, maybe things would have come out differently for them. But looking back on the situation, I also think they were looking for one thing in particular in joining the lodge, and that was business contacts. And that's what happens. So I'm going to go with it's both.
That's what I was going to say, is going back to what Joe brought up, is, we're not taking the time beforehand to get to know why people are really want to joining, and that is not a one phone call or one coffee meeting. That is, sometimes that is multiple visits and multiple events and experiences. And, it's not, again, I have these conversations and I hear, all over the board, but then I have 2 other guys have the same conversations with different questions. And then these guys come out and they meet members and they meet officers, they meet other prospects or, potential candidates. and they're having these discussions, and when the first red flag comes up, we're addressing them, we're bringing it up. I mean, I talked to a gentleman the other day that an email inquiry to us had red flags everywhere, and it was a simple call and pushed him somewhere else, and I think he's going to be better there. But we're not taking the time up front. I think maybe go back to Matt's question is what can we do in the ideal world if the lodge is trying everything? I think this is the opportunity for us to get to be able to nitpick, what are we doing? Is it working? Is it kind of working? Is it not working? And I would confidently say, if a lodge is trying everything and anything, we could probably put more emphasis on the upfront communication and digging deeper. And because there's always there always will be that one or two that slip through, no matter what happens and this and that. But so much can be prevented just by spending an extra month or another dinner or two or another meeting invite where they come out and having a different perspective and different conversation, because us four could talk to the same person and be like, yeah, this guy's great, he's really interested in this and this, and you could have a fifth guy talk to him and be like, whoa, he said this one comment or one phrase that was kind of like, we talked about he's an entrepreneur and we just went down that rabbit hole and he's looking for a business avenue here. So
And Brad, I really like what you guys do. I think it's one of those things, though, you have to, and you guys, from what I'm hearing, have it set up properly. We unfortunately had a case, Joe and I, local in our area, where, a lodge was doing something similar, right? Well, not something similar. One officer of the lodge was basically acting as a gatekeeper for people coming in. And if he didn't approve, he just filed their petitions away and didn't say anything. And I think what you're doing is key, right? And I think in thinking about it, it reveals several things. I don't know if it's wrong, but just several things we're down on our knowledge on as an organization. One is is we don't know our, sister lodges in our district good enough, right? Because every lodge is a bit different. And, you want to be able to send somebody to, as you pointed out, a lodge that they're going to fit in with well from that perspective. But for somebody who's not fit for Masonry, I've heard so many times Freemasons say, well, we're not Rotary, we're not Moose, we're not Elks. And I hate hearing that, because there's nothing wrong with those organizations. And it's totally a dig when somebody says that. And it just chaps my ass to hear that. And there's nothing wrong with joining those organizations. And I think the problem is, we put ourselves on this pedestal from a historical perspective, I guess, that, we're the, be all end all of fraternalism because we have this and they don't have that. And it's stupid. So yeah, I think it's a fault on us that, we don't know where to direct people if they're not necessarily a fit for our organization or our lodge in particular. And I'm off that soapbox.
No, I like that, and I agree with that. Joe, you wanted to add something in there?
Sure.
We'll just cut Brad off real quick.
That's fine. Yeah, we need
Stephen Bradley Drew.
Call me what you want, Matt Parker. Call me what you want.
No, I was just saying off in the chat that our biggest issue, and take this for what it's worth, is that for the past 100 years or so, we've been just completely focused on membership, right? So we've built this giant edifice that we can no longer sustain, right? But to your point, Matt, you said it very eloquently before that maybe we weren't meant to be so big. And, I know Grand Lodges don't like to hear that because they have bills to pay and charities to support and other social organizations, independent bodies to keep filtering members to and the like. But we really lost our focus when it comes to our overall focus is driven towards initiation, not driven towards membership, right? Like most people don't know what initiation means. Initiation essentially is a rite of passage, right? So to Kevin's point, and I think my little guy is in the background, so I apologize. Initiation is a very specific thing that has a very specific purpose, and it's to take you from a mundane state of being to a more selective and spiritual place of being. That is its purpose. You know, it's not to have crappy green bean dinners, and it's not to give money to the shrine, and it's not like you know, to get an adopt a spot sign with your name on it. That is its purpose, is to initiate members. Most people don't get that, you know, and to Kevin's point, knowing ritual does not equal initiation. It just doesn't. You know, you can have people that know their ritual in and out, that can say it quite nicely. It doesn't mean jack shit to them, you know, at the end of the day. And to your point, you're right. We're not better than some other organizations, but I know what our focus is. You know, our focus was, we are meant to initiate men based on certain criteria through a path from a mundane life to something better, you know, that better that Kevin was talking about. And we use the Horamic legend, at least in our case, at least nowadays, as the vehicle for that initiation. It is not the end all be all. It's just, you know, one of the roads. You know, I you know, every time we talk about this, I think back to like things like the Eleusinian mystery schools. Do you really think they did catechisms and gave a crap whether you know, completed your application properly? No.
I'm sure they had one-day conferrals too.
And I don't think they had one-day conferrals either.
So, Joe, I mean, to what you were saying, and I'm glad you hit on that. That's somewhere I wanted to go is, you know, how do we define initiation? I think there are a lot of different ways of defining that. Some people think it's just very mundane. Initiation just means that you were accepted into a group, but I think it's much deeper than that. The initiatic experience creates some kind of fundamental change in who you are. It imprints something on you, and if you are truly initiated, you can never be uninitiated. So if you have a man who's truly initiated into, let's say, masonry, and let's say that he, you know, he's suspended for non-payment of dues or something like that. He's no longer recognized as being a Mason. He can never really be uninitiated. But that's assuming that he was ever initiated to begin with.
Well, and Matt, to your point, you know, just looking up the definition real quick, you know, there's basically two points to it. The first is the action of admitting someone into a secret or obscure society or group, typically with a ritual. The second part is what kind of speaks to me, the action of beginning something. And that kind of speaks to me, right? Because, you know, being initiated into Freemasonry doesn't stop once you've, you know, been raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason, at least. And I think we all agree with that. You know, this is a life, and Joe kind of hit on it, right? This is a lifetime thing. And, you know, there's study involved. There's, you know, stuff like this, talking about, you know, whether it's a podcast like this or just getting together for drinks in a group, whatever, you know, it's more than just receiving your degrees, you know, on 3 nights of, you know, however long it takes. So yeah, you know, that kind of the action of beginning something really speaks out to me, that, you know, says it's a lifelong journey, and it's about continuously learning and educating yourself, you know, in Freemasonry, in your religion, you know, the texts of your religion, whatever. You know, that's how you improve yourself, not through the ritual. You know, the ritual is part of it, but there's a whole lot more to it than just that.
Yeah, Joe, you mentioned the Horamic legend that we use, and what we're really looking at in our 3 degrees is Joseph Campbell's hero's journey.
Well, yeah, essentially, I mean, Campbell does a really good job of explaining the monomyth theory, but, you know, rarely does he talk about Freemasonry as a vehicle for it. So maybe we sucked at it by the time Campbell started writing his books, you know, but to your point, most of your initiatic ritual schools, to Kevin's point, they were very secretive. They admitted only a select few. That's literally what the word esoteric means, right? That really bad word that you know, gets thrown around in Masonry, and 90% of the people don't understand what it means, and the other 10% don't care what it means. But it really is an exclusivity thing. You're going from this stage in your life to this stage in your life, and you have a group of people who have been there and are walking that path with you together. I mean, it sounds like really hocus pocusy stuff, but, you know, at the end of the day, faith and belief is really no different, you know? you're making an active choice to walk that road. Most times alone, sometimes with someone you can trust. But you're leaving who you were and you're becoming who you're meant to be, and it sounds really flowery and wishy-washy, but I think if we had more people that did that, things would be a lot better off nowadays,
I agree. Not just in masonry, but in general. Yeah. Well, we've been going for close to an hour. Does anybody want to give, everybody want to go around, give closing thoughts, comments, threats?
Regrets.
Regrets.
Nope, regrets.
No, Matt, I mean, I would just say, one, I'm really excited for you for this and really happy that you asked to me and us to be a part of this. And, I would just jump on what Kevin said. When I think about the initiatic experience or initiation, I literally, I say initiatic journey, because you can, there are so many different levels and obviously rabbit holes and all that kind of stuff you get into, but that journey starts somewhere. And, unfortunately for 99.9% of people, it's not that first time you started, your entered apprentice degree or whatever that looks like. But, initiation is truly such an incredible journey that I think we're losing guys that want that. And we have guys that really want that deep down, but they don't know they want it. And we're not informing them that we have it available. And that's at all of our faults. But I think that would be my closing remark. Is I love that Kevin said the word journey, because that's exactly how I look at it.
Yeah, Matt, thank you for having me. This is great. I look forward to seeing where you take this and where this goes. I love the idea of soapbox masons because it's great. No, it's funny. I go through these periods where I don't want to say I get tired of masonry, but I get a little depressed because, I feel like it's just something's not there. But it's exciting to know that you're doing this with this podcast, because this was a breath of fresh air for me tonight. I feel, my cup is filled right now. I feel fantastic. So thank you. I wish you luck. This is going to be awesome. This was a fantastic discussion. I loved it. I love you guys. So, it's not hard. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, Kevin was so cute. Yeah, no, Matt, this has been absolutely great. I'm so happy for you, and I'm so proud of you for doing this. I'm sure we're all going to see bigger and better things. So I'm excited to see what you have going on. And again, thank you for having us, especially this weird bunch of guys who you wouldn't think we'd get along very well, but we kind of do. Because we all understand that initiatic journey that we walk through together. So, yeah, no, this is great, man. And like Kevin said, I love that you call it Soapbox Masons, because I don't feel like I'm on a soapbox enough. So thank you. But yeah, my parting words are, if you feel like you've not been on an initiatic journey, like Brad said, it's not too late, whether you've been a Mason for 1 year or 20 years, it's never too late. And if you do read things like Campbell, you'll see that for a lot of it, you're going to walk that path alone, but just know that there's people that think like you and people that care for you and people that love you, even though they've never met you, to walk that journey with you. So again, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And I love you. And yes, I have a lisp, so shut up.
Oh, and one more thing. And if you are looking for something more, you can get that at Mid-Atlantic Esotericon coming up June 12th, 2021. Yeah.
Joe, how did you miss that?
I wasn't going to plug it on your show. It's your show, dude.
Yeah,
plug it on the first. That was great.
Sorry. That's bullshit. Yeah.
Sorry.
I totally wasn't going to plug it because I didn't want to rain on your parade. So
actually, I do want to say this though, because what something Kevin said just sparked something in me. If you didn't get the initiatic experience you were looking for in your lodge, but you have that desire, you don't necessarily have to rely on your lodge to get that. There are other brothers around, such as us, who are happy to work with you and have these discussions with you. You've already gone through the degrees. You know what the degrees are. Pick up a book by Wilmshurst, Steinmetz, any of these great Masonic authors. speak to learned brothers around you, like Joe Martinez, Kevin Homan, and if you're really desperate, you can speak with Brad Drew.
Brad.
Or any of these other brothers around you, because the information's out there, the enlightenment you're looking for is out there. If you're not finding it in your Blue Lodge, don't give up on it.
No.
That's been the best part of COVID, right? I mean, his brothers have been forced to do that, and we've seen positivity from it. So,
absolutely, I think this might be a reset button for masonry in a way.
Sounds like an innovation.
Just make sure your grand jurisdiction allows you to get online for stuff. That might be a problem.
All right, well, brothers, we will call it an evening from there, but I do appreciate it, and we will have another episode soon and pick up another hot button topic to hopefully rub some people the wrong way, but I'm certainly not trying to do that. But I appreciate each and every one of you being here. Appreciate what we did tonight, and I got a lot out of it. I think you've each given me more to think about. And yeah, let's go from there. Let's make a difference.
Yes.
All right. Good night.
Night, guys.